In this video, I'm going over my experiences with this setup. It's a Sony ZV-E10, which is video focused, but I used it for photography with this Viltrox 28mm f4.5 pancake lens. It's a very compact setup, which is great, but considering this is a video focused camera, there are some quirks, and this lens itself is very unique. So let's check it out. I went to a beautiful Japanese style garden in my area to take photos, nice casual photography. Considering that, I wanted to go as simple as possible with settings, so I was mostly using program mode with this setup. You're letting the camera decide shutter speed and ISO. It's not always going to work properly, but it turned out okay most of the time. It's a very unique mix of physical properties and function, and it's certainly novel, and I do like the lens, but there's a lot you need to consider if you're interested in it. With this lens, it has that fixed f4.5 aperture. I didn't really notice any issues in bright conditions at that aperture, so you shouldn't have any serious problems. I did update the firmware on both for this photo outing. The Sony has firmware 2.02 on it, and the Viltrox lens has 1.0.7. The main downside of this lens is it does not have a manual focus ring. That means you rely on the camera to have all the functions and functionality you would need with autofocus to make it work how you want. I have used it with the Sony a6000 and the Sony a7S. They do function, but there are some quirks related to video, especially with autofocus or just getting some type of focus and adjusting it. So it would have been really nice if it had a focus ring, but sadly not the case. You can get around it in many situations. For the Photowalk, like I said, I was using program, letting the camera decide shutter speed and ISO. I did use exposure compensation as needed, but it was relatively challenging on this camera considering it doesn't have a viewfinder to adjust things how I thought were correct in the given scenes because it's very bright. I did use the sunny weather mode on the screen, so that helped me at least see what was being composed with the camera, but it does have its downsides. There were a number of photos that I did use exposure compensation for. Obviously, you can just use full manual in that case. You'll have your fixed aperture based on the lens, and then you can adjust shutter speed and ISO as needed. It's not a lot more difficult than using program mode plus exposure compensation, so use what you feel comfortable with in that case. Looking up close at the photos, I did see quite a few with a really nice amount of detail in them. Given the lens is f4.5, that's really not a bad result in my opinion, but obviously on the corners of the images, it's not going to be great with this lens, and you can see that when focusing, there's a huge amount of shift in the image when it focuses. Even with this newer Sony camera, the lens does rack focus back and forth a little bit, trying to get critical focus. I think it's just how it works with this combination. Obviously, this does have phase detect on the sensor, so I'm not really sure why that's the case. It's just how it's going to work. Another downside of this lens is the minimum focus. I really wish I could get closer with this lens, but then that would likely make it larger, so it partly defeats the purpose of a really compact lens like this. I'm stricken on whether it would have made sense to get closer minimum focus. I would have preferred a little bit thicker of a lens, but I understand the appeal of this. It's officially 1.05 foot or 0.32 meters for that minimum, and I just really wanted more a lot of the time. It's not terrible by any means at 0.11x, but still, yeah, based on my personal preferences and how I take photos, I do like to get closer with these nature situations. That being said, I don't think this lens is especially great at longer distance landscape style photos. Obviously on the edges of the frame, it's not going to be amazing. Then considering that, I really just don't think it's great for landscape either. Specifically to the Sony ZV-E10, there are a lot of quirks with it for photography. I had the camera set to RAW mode, and this jog dial next to the shutter is a zoom feature. I don't know if you can turn it off, but it was really frustrating because whenever I touched it accidentally, pops up a message on the screen and you have to press the shutter or something to cancel it out. Frustration feature, as I would call it. And in general, it's very video focused. You can switch it on, which is nice and simple, but then you have to press a button to cycle through the modes. You don't have a viewfinder. The fully articulating screen does have its benefits for photography, which is nice. It does have the sunny weather mode, which makes it serviceable. It's very compact, which is also nice. The grip is decent. The control layout isn't terrible. I don't know if this camera has a minimum shutter speed setting when you're in something like program mode. I couldn't find that setting. Maybe it's in there somewhere. But obviously you can use full manual. That solves the issue. Like I said, I was using program mode most of the time, and there were quite a few photos that were around 1/50th of a second that appeared to have motion blur, which is odd to me. Yeah, I'm not totally sure what was going on. I did use this a little bit for video. I had active steady shot on, which you pretty much need in this case, considering the lens does not have stabilization. You can see those clips on screen and decide for yourself if they look decent. In use, this camera is pretty nice for video. When you're using this combination for video, the screen is a nice benefit. You can adjust it and position yourself so you don't have to stand like a photographer. You can stand however makes most sense for video. Overall, a pleasant photo walk with this combination. I'll probably use it again at some point. The compact nature of this setup is its main benefit. Image quality isn't terrible, and it does take some effort finding the best distance from your subject composition that makes it interesting. That's definitely a challenge, but that's not really a bad thing. So you can kind of learn and grow with it and try to get the most out of it, which is pretty fun. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this photo walk. Scott Truffy Bonsai, thanks.